Ferguson from North Vernon. Terry is a scholar of the American Civil War. His interest in portraying General Lew Wallace was driven by that study and his deep respect and admiration for General Wallace as a soldier, writer, and inventor. He researches and reads extensively about General Wallace to deliver an accurate persona of the general. His presentation is in first person, quoting from General Wallace's autobiography, the statement of those who fought with him in the Civil War, and other biographical texts. He also uses articles, speeches, and letters from the general. A member of the Vernon Grays and 6th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, Mr. Ferguson is a Civil War reenactor and living historian. Mr. Ferguson holds a bachelor's and master's degree in education. He earned a bachelor's of arts degrees in secondary education from Central Michigan University. He also earned a master's degree in education from Ball State. He is a career educator who has taught at the junior and senior high levels. Currently, he teaches English at Jennings County High School. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Terry Ferguson as General Lew Wallace.
Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the 6th and the 11th Indiana, my hometown boys, for showing up here, and also for the Sons of Union Veterans for their support at the dedication of this monument. I have been a lawyer, a Civil War general, a Civil War judge, a state senator, a territorial governor, a minister of Turkey, an inventor, a painter, a violinist, a poet, and an author. I cannot fail to mention a husband, a father, and a grandfather. While my novel Ben-Hur brought me fame, my military career brought me glory and grief. Andrew Wallace, my grandfather, emigrated from Pennsylvania to Cincinnati. He then moved the family here to Brookville, along with my father, the second of 7 boys. David Wallace, my father, acquired a cadetship to the West Point Academy through William Henry Harrison, who was a friend of my grandfather's. After graduation, grandfather stayed at West Point as a professor of mathematics. Then, with no war on the horizon, he decided to move to Brookville to open a law office. He married Esther French Test in 1824, and I was born 3 years later here. Though my father was a successful lawyer, my childhood was shaped by my attitude to ignore studies. I spent more time in the woods and down by the rivers than I ever did in school. Then when the family moved to Covington, Indiana, I discovered war and drawing. Early one morning, my father rode away in a blue frock coat with brass buttons and a sash, a hat of the half-moon style, and a white silk cockade, astride a dazzling horse. I followed, and I watched. The militia of the county was in military drill. Colonel Wallace was commanding. Thereafter, I was kept busy with drawings of portraits of war and battle scenes. Then, after his election to 6th Governor of Indiana, my father took the family with him to Indianapolis. The State House contained many books. They were everywhere. Because of my lack of interest and my truancy, my rating at school, however, was the worst. Yet, I was acquiring a habit of reading. And looking back on the thrashings I took at school, without a whimper, I console myself in thinking of all the successful lives there have been with not a bit of algebra in them. In my 16th year, Father told me I had willfully thrown away all my opportunities for an education. He told me I had to go find my own employment. My first occupation was copying records in a county clerk's office, which gave me plenty of free time in the evenings. In Indianapolis, a military company the City Grays had organized. Its success led to another, the Marion Rifles, of which I had the honor of being elected 2nd sergeant. The Rifles despised the snobbish Grays, and the Grays laughed at us Rifles. So we had a mock battle. At the mock battle between the companies, the Grays were predetermined to win. But a free-for-all ensued. We took prisoners and left as masters of the field. It turned my taste for military life into a genuine passion. My 18th year, I determined to become a lawyer and applied for the bar exam. But at the same time, there was a rumor of a war with Mexico. So I stuck out a sign, "For Mexico, fall in." And within 3 days, the company was filled. The second lieutenancy was given to me. Though I saw little action, the taste for the military was still whetted. Back in the States for muster out, I went back again to my father's office and mixed study with more law. At 21, I applied for it and received that coveted law license and decided to move my law office to Covington, a little village on the Wabash River, just 30 miles from Crawfordsville, where I had met Miss Susan Elston, whose older sister was married to my former military commander from the war with Mexico. 4 years later, I traveled to Crawfordsville and married her. Knowing that the Civil War was inevitable, I organized Montgomery Guards with the state-furnished arms and equipment, a magazine containing an article of the drill of Algerian Zouaves of France fell into my hands. The company was pleased to see the drill, and they all bought Zouave outfits. And we challenged other outfits in drill. Nobody ever accepted the challenge. Then the afternoon of April 13th, 1861, while addressing the jury, I received a telegram from Governor Oliver P. Morton. Fort Sumter had been fired upon. Governor Morton offered me the office as the Adjutant General of Indiana. Indiana not only filled the quota, but raised enough troops to double what was needed. Having done my job as Adjutant General, I resigned to become Colonel of the 11th Regiment Zouaves. The unit started with the 6th, since 1 through 5 was the Mexican War. Then a chain of circumstance brought our Zouaves to Cumberland, Maryland. Almost immediately after detraining, I led a surprise raid on Romney, Virginia. The enemy received notice and was already in full retreat. The Zouaves had frightened the rebels from Harper's Ferry and reopened the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad to Union traffic. Union newspapers rejoiced. In February '62, General Grant schemed to capture Forts Hyman and Henry on the Tennessee River and Fort Donelson on the Cumberland, therefore to squeeze the enemy out of Kentucky. Having recently been promoted to Brigadier General, I was astonished to find Hyman and Henry both vacant. Donelson, though, proved a test. But the Zouaves cleared the hill, driving the rebels before them. And just before daylight, 2 Confederate officers with a white flag rode out to surrender. Confederate General Buckner received the celebrated unconditional surrender correspondence from General Grant. A few days later, newspapers announced I've been promoted to Major General, the highest rank of the American Army. General Grant next assembled the Army at Pittsburgh Landing, 9 miles south of Savannah. At Crump's Landing, halfway between these 2 points, my 3rd Division was told to remain alert. At dawn, April 6th, gray-clad demons erupted from the woods upon the tents of the unsuspecting Federals. Uninformed of our Army's retreat, we marched the wrong road, did not come to the right flank until after dark. But at daybreak, my artillery blasted the Confederate battery from its position on bluff. And from that time, the word was forward. That was our only order, and step by step, the rebel lines went back, never stopping again. The firing was grand and terrible. A shot nicked the horn of my saddle. By 4 p.m., the enemy was routed. After the Battle of Shiloh, General Halleck assumed command from General Grant, but General Halleck was then sent east, and General Grant was reinstated. Grant gave me 2 weeks' leave as I requested. When I was called to the governor's office, I thought that I was getting a command. Instead, he asked me to do war speeches. I detested war speeches. Now I realized I was a scapegoat of Shiloh. In '63, in stumping the state in the latest call for men, I received news that Confederate Kirby Smith was moving north from Knoxville towards Cincinnati. I was given command of Cincinnati, proclaiming martial law in that Queen City and the 2 suburbs, Covington and Newport. Every male citizen was put under military rule. Then, considering how well the city was prepared, the interlopers left towards Louisville. Back to the shelf I went. General Halleck is authorized a few days to return to Crawfordsville. About the 9th of July, a telegram from Governor Morton reached me while I was fishing on the Kankakee. John Hunt Morgan had crossed the Ohio River into Indiana. I rushed to Indianapolis for orders. After waiting 8 hours for ammunition, I entrained 1,300 raw troops on cattle cars that had not been cleaned. In Columbus at 10 p.m., I learned that Indiana Legion General Love had refused to surrender to Morgan and instead had demanded Morgan's surrender. And when my troops arrived early the next morning, ready for battle, we were aided by the local Legion soldiers, Native American sharpshooters from the 1st Michigan. But Morgan had decamped with his whole force heading east. Raid ended, the flurry over, I went back to the shelf. In 1864, President Lincoln gave me command of the Middle Department, comprising Delaware and all of Maryland east of the Monocacy River, and headquartered in Baltimore. General Lee conceived a surprise attack by General Early through the Shenandoah Valley upon Washington. When Early took mastery of the valley by driving out 2 Union veterans, generals, I responded and concentrated my diminutive force near Frederick on the Monocacy River, between Baltimore and Washington. I planned to intercept Early, whichever way he decided to move. The occasion I had dreamt now seemed to rush before me. The fighting was desperate at close quarters. The next day, however, the inevitable, we had to retreat. But Early had been delayed a full day, just enough time for General Grant to replenish Washington's defense. Secretary of War Stanton complimented the action had been well managed and saved Washington. Grant conceded that I had hindered Early long enough to ensure Washington's safety. This was the South's last offensive movement of any consequence, so I felt I had done my penance for Shiloh. But all was later overshadowed by the assassination of our president. Taking charge of the remains of the late president, I was ordered to Washington as the second-ranking member of the military commission to try the persons responsible for the assassination of Lincoln. The trial was the most dramatic in American history. All were found guilty. 4 were hung. Then in mid-August, I was named president of a commission to try Confederate Captain Wirz for maltreating and murdering Union prisoners at Andersonville. Evidence concluded that too great a number of prisoners were carted into too small an area. Prisoners were without shelter, or without food. The defense attempted to prove that Wirz was a good character and he was only obeying orders. But witnesses were hard to find. The commission found him guilty, and he was hung. After my resignation from the U.S. Army in 1866, the Mexican Republican government, headed by Benito Juarez, promised a major general's commission in the Mexican service with command of Union troops. The city of Mexico fell, and once more Juarez's constitutional government ruled. As I left for home, I traveled exactly the road marched over 18 years before, with all the old memories at every step. I later used this military experience as territorial governor of New Mexico, where I had to deal with Billy the Kid, and as foreign minister to Turkey. Even in 1898, at the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, 1871, I offered to raise and lead a force of troops in Cuba, but the War Office refused. Undeterred, I went to the local recruiting office to enlist as a private. But again, I was rejected. Apparently, they thought I was too old. But in retrospect, I would have to say that my military life has taught me one thing. Our country is the best, the freest, and the happiest one beneath God's sunshine.
Amen.
Thank you.